In this exhibition, we've got 3 bodies of work that I produced over 12, 13 years. The first one being American Night, which are these very white, overexposed pictures from all the compass points of America, north, south, east, west. The invisibility of the poor and the dispossessed in the United States, how they've sort of been edited out of our seeing in a way. The second, chronologically speaking, and body of work that's presented in its entirety here is called A Shimmer of Possibility, where you'll see these stuttering sequences of very innocuous everyday moments that I share through my photography with people I've met traveling around the United States. And then finally, work called The Present, which is street photography from New York City in diptychs and triptychs, examining the confluence of people and moments and attention that you have as you navigate one of America's major cities at this point of time. Well, these 3 bodies of work that I described have here been united under the title The Whiteness of the Whale, which is the chapter 42, I believe it is, of Moby Dick. It's one of these bizarre chapters where Herman Melville rants about the color whiteness. And my interest in that book and that title obviously came initially from American Night. These white, blinding white pictures driving across America with this obsessive, monomaniacal pursuit of something. That it became the starting point for that interest in Moby Dick and what that book was about and how that related to the American Night work. It doesn't, I don't want to make people believe that Moby Dick is some key to this work. It's not. It's a useful title. It's a beautiful title. It refers to being in the belly of the beast, the whiteness of the whale. And that's a kind of perfect metaphor for traveling and being within America now. These works do talk to some degree about the nature of seeing and photography itself. To be more specific than that, in some ways the American Night pictures, the white pictures, deal with intensity of light flooding in, obviously, and the way you control that on the camera is with the aperture on the camera, the iris, that little sort of eye that opens and closes, that controls the flood of light or flow of it onto the camera. Shimmer deals with stuttering moments of time, cut up, time chopped into sort of sequences, brief erratic sequences, which you control time in the camera with the shutter control. So that's the aperture control and the shutter control. And The Present, the third and final body of work here, the New York street pictures, have very shallow focus on them. They just deal with something coming into focus, focal awareness, very sharp. Before it and behind it is blurry, out of focus. And then that moves and another thing comes into focus. So our awareness changes according to the focus. And that's the third and final control of the camera. How much light, how much time, and where the lens is focused. And each of these series, in their own way, examines and deals with that content of photography. Aperture, the light, shutter, the time, and focus, which is our awareness or consciousness. And that's where it becomes more interesting, because at the end of the day, I don't really care about 3 controls on the camera. But in terms of light and time and awareness or consciousness, that's far more interesting and far more provocative as something worth exploring. The first body of work, chronologically speaking, is called American Night, and is these very large, overwhelming pictures of near invisible landscape in America. White, overexposed, quite difficult to see images of the poor, which snap and contrast into these full color pictures of delightful new middle-class homes in the desert of California, as it happens, north of Los Angeles. The third type of pictures are these dark inner city street photographs from New York or greater New York. Contrast between abundance and invisibility, between full color and white blankness, is pretty dramatic and pretty present. The white pictures obviously deal with sight, seeing, the difficulty of seeing, of blindness, psychological blindness, They also deal with seeing in photography itself, with seeing through photographs, with what we can see, what we can't see. How photography can mimic a state of mind, a state of consciousness of the world. I mean, when one looks at these pictures, they are hard to see. They are difficult. One has to work at seeing them. One has to overcome one's initial reaction that there is nothing there, there's no one there, there's nothing to see here, let's move along. And actually persist. You have to choose to look into the photographs, to see the person there, the figure, to notice their hands, their body, the clothes they are wearing. You have to choose to do this. You have to choose to overcome your own blindness, in a way, your own initial reaction. And that speaks and mimics much of the way we all operate today, myself included, of course. That we've learned to edit out things we don't wish to see on the street in life. We've learned to walk past them, to keep going. And that may not so matter in small everyday matters, but it does matter in the bigger pictures of life. You know, how we learn to edit an entire set of our population out of our vision, out of our awareness of life today. The complete project, A Shimmer of Possibility, was first released as 12 slim books, each containing its own little story or small combination of stories together. So many of these situations, they're nearly always presented with multiple pictures that vary in size and position up and down the wall, which is a sort of attempt to get closer to the act of seeing and noticing in the world. We glance at someone's face, then we look down at their hands, then we look back again at their face, then perhaps at their shoes or their feet, or change focus to what's going on behind them, and then back to them again. And in Shimmer, you mostly find that. That's the act of seeing. That process is attempted to be mimicked on the walls. So what appears to be sort of a patchwork is in fact a slowing down of the process of recognition and consciousness of this shared moment. The title, A Shimmer of Possibility, it's a little bit elusive, but I hope people will feel, as I do, that it's positive. It's somewhat uplifting. You know, life shimmers with possibility. That even in the most mundane and humdrum of circumstances, you know, there is this glow of being alive, you know, whether it's just eating this meal at the bus stop or smoking a cigarette while you wait, or a walk down through Chelsea and Boston, or a sunset in North Dakota, that how life glows with opportunity and wonder. Within Shimmer, there's a sort of attempt to move from classic photographic vision, which I liken to a spotlight consciousness or a spotlight awareness, where photography takes this one tightly focused beam and selects this one thing out of the whole, you know, unilluminated darkness of life, and says that's it. And this is an attempt to actually move from that spotlight consciousness, that spotlight awareness, into a sort of more of a floodlight or lantern awareness, where the whole, a broader range of time is illuminated, where you see the moment arriving, you see a distraction happening behind, you see the moment there, you see the moment afterwards. So you see events arriving, folding around you, and departing behind you. I've often juxtaposed 2 or even 3 stories together, three moments together. For example, the man in Las Vegas waiting for a cigarette ties in with a man who is in San Francisco, as it happens, selling flowers on the street. Another one is a stunning sunset in North Dakota, along with a woman walking the streets in New York, who seems a little disturbed and unhappy and keeps rubbing her head with her hand in a very particular way. And just to try and unite these 2 disparate stories and disparate moments as a way of provoking a thought about the multiple ongoing threads of life, you know, that are happening in this country simultaneously, how we're all living in our own, you know, our own moments in our own little worlds, but they all are definitely interrelated. You know, this concurrency of life's flow that is pretty astonishing to behold. There really isn't anything that you would think you could make a novel on or base a news article on. But that's equally deliberate and intentional in the sense of those are the moments that make up 99% of our lives. You know, our lives aren't made up of drama and car crashes and, you know, dramatic events. Our lives are made up of the humdrum and the quotidian. And if one is seeking to touch upon that, the quality that makes people's lives, you have to deal with this great ocean of life, of everyday life around you, and respecting it and giving it value, not dismissing it. And Shimmer in some ways struggles to articulate that, that unspoken ocean of commonplace existence. So the work titled The Present is the third and final part of the three parts of this exhibition. It's last chronologically or most recent, if you want to put it that way. And it's simply pictures from the streets in New York, of New York street photography in one sense, the classic street photography. In another sense, it breaks from that classic tradition of street photography. Done mostly around 2009, 10, and a bit in 11. And deals with life in one place. It's not traveling around America anymore. It's my home city. I live in New York. And deals purely with that one position and life as it comes at you, unbidden, unstaged. Very important to say that. Nothing is set up here, no one's acting. There's no props or scenario that I've created. This is life as it comes at you. The works in the present are installed exceptionally low to the floor for the most part. They're barely raised above the ground level, simply to have this feeling of the street being part of the gallery, where there's continuation between the floor of the gallery and the sidewalk itself. You know, the one flows into another. Of course, it's bizarre to call some photographs the present because they'll inevitably, the instant they're taken, they age and they date, which is something I look forward to with this work in a way. It's a provocative use of the title of the term, the present, but they will inevitably, just in 10 years or 20 years, they'll quickly look aged with the clothing, the hairstyle, the street signage. All that will age in the same way that we now look at a picture of the 1940s or 50s with a complete in perspective. Photography is wonderful in that way, that you know, it actually is capable of folding time in that way, of taking it and embroidering itself into the fabric of life as it flows at us, and giving us something where we can look at in the distant future and see much clearer what the present amounted to at that point. When one looks at the present, you'll find quite a few works that touch upon the motif of blindness or partial sight. There's a man with an eye patch. There's actually two men with eye patches. There's another man with his white stick going across the road on the sidewalk there. And that connects clearly with the question of sight and vision and blindness in American Night with the white pictures. It's a recurring motif, I guess you could say, but a question of seeing, the physical impossibility or difficulty of seeing, along with the psychological difficulty, you know, or awareness of one's vision and what one's prepared to see and notice in life. I would hope that when people leave this, that to some modest degree they would carry with them out, as they step out of this museum, this institution, to the world, and they would see and recognize pieces that they'd seen, or moments that appeared very similar to a shimmer of possibility as they stand at the tram stop, or as they walk down the Embarcadero and they see people arriving and departing like they do in the present, or if they see a homeless person off in the distance across the other side of the road, that reminds them of American Night. To me, that expansion and recognition of our way of seeing would be a triumph in itself.